The situation had already crossed the line between danger and disaster. For a unit like the Navy SEALs, trained to operate behind enemy lines, outnumbered, isolated, and under fire, there are very few moments when the word crisis truly applies. This was one of them. The mission had begun as a controlled insertion, carefully planned with satellite intel, drone overwatch, and precise timing. But war rarely respects plans. Within minutes of landing, everything that could go wrong did. Communications degraded, extraction windows collapsed, and enemy movement surged far beyond initial estimates. The SEALs found themselves pinned in hostile terrain that offered little cover and even less room to maneuver. Every attempt to reposition was met with accurate fire. The enemy wasn't reckless. They were organized, coordinated, and clearly aware that an elite unit was operating in their territory. That alone suggested intelligence leaks or prior surveillance. For professionals who rely on surprise and speed, losing the element of surprise is catastrophic. Each second dragged on felt heavier than the last, not because of fear, but because of responsibility. Every man knew that a single mistake could cost not just his life, but the lives of his teammates. Ammo counts dropped faster than expected. Medical supplies were already in use. One operator was wounded, another concussed by a near blast. The team leader did the math silently, distance to extraction, enemy numbers, remaining firepower, and came to a conclusion no commander ever wants to reach. This fight could not be won head-on. The terrain favored the enemy, the numbers favored the enemy, and time was running out. Even elite training has limits when surrounded, exposed, and hunted. The radio crackled with static, broken voices overlapping. Higher command tried to re-establish control, but air support was delayed, drones were pushed back by electronic interference, and fast movers were unavailable due to weather and airspace risk. The SEALs were operating in the narrow gap where global military power simply couldn't reach fast enough. This wasn't a movie moment with instant backup. It was the raw reality of special operations, where teams sometimes operate so deep that help becomes a concept rather than a certainty. When the words "send help" were whispered into the mic, they weren't spoken out of panic. They were spoken out of calculation. It was an acknowledgement that skill alone could not solve the problem anymore. It meant the team had reached the edge of survivability, where the next few minutes would decide whether the mission would be remembered as a success, a tragedy, or something classified and never discussed again. In that moment, the SEALs weren't thinking about heroism or legacy. They were thinking about holding the line just long enough for something, anything, to change. No one saw her arrive. There was no sound of boots on gravel, no radio call announcing friendly movement, no shadow crossing the ground to give her away. One moment, the SEALs were locked in a desperate holding pattern, scanning ridgelines and tree lines for the next wave of enemy movement. The next, a single suppressed shot cracked through the chaos, sharp, deliberate, unmistakably precise. An enemy fighter collapsed where he stood mid-stride before anyone could react. Then another fell, and another. The rhythm was wrong for automatic fire and too calm for chance. Someone out there was working with intent. At first, confusion cut through the unit faster than relief. Friendly snipers weren't supposed to be in position, and no aerial platform was cleared to engage. Yet the shots continued, each one spaced just enough to signal control, not panic. Enemy fire began to stutter, then break apart entirely. Men who had been advancing with confidence suddenly froze, unsure of where death was coming from. In special operations, that kind of psychological disruption is often more powerful than explosives. Whoever this shooter was, she understood that. The SEALs adjusted instinctively, shifting sectors, watching how the battlefield responded. That's when they realized the truth. The sniper wasn't reacting to the fight, she was shaping it. Targets dropped in a sequence that made sense only to someone with a full picture of the terrain. Enemy leaders went down first. Radio carriers were neutralized next. Heavy weapons crews never got the chance to re-engage.
This wasn't random support. It was deliberate intervention by someone who had already studied the ground, anticipated movements, and committed to the outcome long before the first shot. When the team finally identified her position, disbelief followed. She was operating alone, far beyond where any conventional support should have been. No visible spotter, no resupply, no backup element. Just a barely visible silhouette blending perfectly with the environment, rifle steady, posture disciplined. Her presence felt unreal, like an answer that had arrived before the question was fully asked. In a battle defined by noise and urgency, she moved with quiet certainty. The SEALs didn't try to contact her immediately. Professionals recognize competence when they see it, and interrupting a working system can be deadly. Instead, they synchronized their movements with the openings she created. As enemy pressure collapsed under her fire, the team maneuvered, extracted their wounded, and reclaimed ground that had seemed lost minutes earlier. The fight didn't end instantly, but the balance had shifted completely. Only later, in the brief calm that followed, did the weight of her arrival truly register. She hadn't come as reinforcements in the traditional sense. She hadn't been summoned by command or guided in by coordinates. She had appeared because she chose to be there at the exact moment when precision mattered more than numbers. To the SEALs, hardened by years of combat, her sudden intervention felt less like luck and more like fate, an unseen guardian stepping out of the shadows when survival demanded it. Once the reality of what she was doing became clear, the scale of her effectiveness was impossible to ignore. This was not suppressive fire meant to scare or delay. Every round she sent down range carried intent, calculation, and finality. From an unseen vantage point, she worked through the battlefield with the patience of someone who had already accepted that there would be no second chances. Distance was her ally, elevation was her advantage, time itself bent around her discipline. Each shot followed the same ruthless logic. She observed first, letting targets reveal themselves through movement, posture, and behavior. Those who gave orders died first. Those who relayed information followed. Heavy weapons teams never completed their setups. Men who thought they were safely concealed discovered too late that concealment is not cover. Wind, range, humidity, angle, variables that break inexperienced shooters were absorbed and corrected as if by instinct. The rifle spoke only when the outcome was certain.
The enemy began to unravel not because of how many were hit, but because of how they were hit. Fighters dropped mid-command, mid-step, mid-breath. There was no visible pattern they could adapt to, no direction they could charge, no shooter they could flank. Every attempt to regroup resulted in another body hitting the ground. Fear spread faster than orders ever could. In asymmetric warfare, morale is a weapon, and she wielded it with terrifying efficiency. 25 confirmed kills was not a statistic, it was a process. She did not rush, she did not celebrate. She simply continued until the battlefield was mathematically broken. When ammunition became a concern, she adjusted target priority. When movement stalled, she waited. When an opportunity appeared, she took it without hesitation. The spacing between shots told its own story, calm, deliberate, and unwavering. Anyone listening closely could hear the confidence embedded in the silence between impacts. For the SEALs on the ground, the effect was immediate and undeniable. Pressure that had felt suffocating minutes earlier evaporated in stages. Incoming fire slowed, then fractured, then ceased entirely in some sectors. The team advanced not because they were ordered to, but because instinct told them the danger curve was collapsing. Each enemy eliminated by her rifle created space, physical space to move, and mental space to think. What made her lethality truly extraordinary was not the number itself, but the conditions under which it was achieved. No rapid extraction, no protective perimeter, no overwatch watching her back. She operated as if failure was not an option worth considering. Every trigger pull committed her position further, yet she remained untouched, unseen, and unstoppable. That level of composure does not come from talent alone. It comes from experience sharpened by consequence. By the time the last enemy threat dissolved into retreat and silence, her count had reached 25, not as a boast, but as a threshold.
Beyond that point, the fight no longer existed. The battlefield had been reset by precision alone. For the SEALs, hardened veterans of modern warfare, it was a rare thing to witness combat decided so cleanly, so quietly, and so completely by a single unseen shooter who never once revealed herself until the outcome was already sealed. The battlefield did not fall silent because of overwhelming force, but because of control. What unfolded was a masterclass in silent, tactical warfare, where patience outweighed aggression and intelligence proved deadlier than firepower. She never rushed the fight, never flooded the air with noise or movement. Instead, she let the enemy reveal themselves through their own mistakes. In environments like this, sound is information, movement is confession, and hesitation is fatal. She understood that better than anyone present. Her positioning was everything, chosen not for convenience, but for dominance. It gave her visibility without exposure. Natural contours of the terrain masked her outline, while elevation allowed gravity and ballistics to work in her favor. She did not fight the environment, she became part of it. Every breath was controlled, every adjustment minimal. The rifle was an extension of stillness, not aggression. In contrast to the chaos below, her world was calm, measured, almost detached. Stealth was not just about remaining unseen, it was about remaining unpredictable. She varied her firing rhythm, denied the enemy any chance to triangulate her location, and used silence as a weapon. Long pauses between shots made fighters second-guess their instincts. Was it safe to move? Was the threat gone? Each false assumption cost another life. The enemy began firing blindly into hillsides and shadows, wasting ammunition, revealing positions, feeding her more information with every panicked decision. Intelligence guided every action. She read body language the way others read maps. A man standing too confidently was likely a leader. Someone crouched near equipment was likely a gunner. Runners were messengers. None of this required radio intercepts or digital feeds, just experience and observation. She dismantled the enemy's command and control structure without them ever realizing it was happening. By the time confusion set in, there was no one left to restore order. For the SEALs, this kind of warfare was instantly recognizable. It mirrored the principles they lived by: move only when necessary, strike only when it matters, disappear before the enemy can respond. Her actions synchronized with theirs, without a word exchanged. As she froze enemy movement, they repositioned. As she eliminated threats, they advanced. It was unspoken coordination born from shared doctrine and mutual understanding of the battlefield. The silence itself became oppressive. Gunfire echoed less frequently. Shouts turned into whispers. Fighters stopped advancing and started hiding. In modern combat, silence often signals danger more than noise ever could. The enemy felt watched, measured, hunted. Every shadow became suspect. Every step felt like a gamble. That psychological weight crushed their momentum far more effectively than sustained gunfire. What made this approach devastating was its efficiency. No wasted rounds, no unnecessary exposure, no emotional decisions. She treated combat as a series of problems to be solved, not a storm to be endured. Each solved problem reduced the enemy's ability to fight back until resistance became impossible. By the time the last shots faded, the victory felt inevitable, as if the outcome had been decided long before the first trigger was pulled. In that quiet dominance, silent tactical warfare proved its greatest truth. The deadliest battles are often won by those who speak the least, move the slowest, and understand the battlefield better than anyone on it. Long after the smoke cleared and the terrain returned to its natural stillness, the story began to take on a life of its own, not as an official report or a line in an after-action summary, but as something passed quietly between professionals who understood what they had witnessed. Among the SEALs, it wasn't told with exaggeration or bravado. It was told with restraint, the way real legends are, measured, precise, and stripped of unnecessary detail. That alone gave it weight.
What made the event resonate wasn't just survival, or even victory. It was the manner in which the impossible had unfolded with such calm inevitability. In a profession where skill is expected and courage is assumed, it takes something extraordinary to leave a lasting mark. This did.
The idea that a single unseen figure could enter a collapsing situation and reshape its outcome so completely challenged even their hardened understanding of warfare. What made the event resonate wasn't just survival or even victory. It was the manner in which the impossible had unfolded with such calm inevitability. In a profession where skill is expected and courage is assumed, it takes something extraordinary to leave a lasting mark. This did. The idea that a single unseen figure could enter a collapsing situation and reshape its outcome so completely challenged even their hardened understanding of warfare. It felt less like rescue and more like intervention. There was no dramatic introduction, no heroic announcement, no moment where she stepped into the open to be recognized. She arrived, acted, and vanished back into obscurity with the same discipline that defined her presence. That absence of spectacle is what elevated the story beyond rumor. Anyone can be loud, very few can be decisive in silence. The SEALs understood that distinction immediately, and it shaped how they remembered her. In time, the details blurred at the edges. Distances changed slightly, timelines compressed, but the core never shifted. A moment of absolute desperation, followed by precise, almost surgical salvation. The number 25 became less important than what it represented, the threshold where chaos turns into control, where survival becomes certainty. In that sense, the story stopped being about numbers or tactics and became about belief. Belief that mastery still matters, that discipline still wins, and that unseen guardians sometimes exist in the margins of war. For those who were there, the legend carried a deeper meaning. It reinforced why they trained the way they did, why standards were unforgiving, and why anonymity was often the highest form of respect. She didn't seek recognition, and none was demanded. Her legacy lived in the fact that everyone walked away alive. In special operations culture, that outcome speaks louder than medals ever could. As the story traveled, it evolved into something almost mythic among those who heard it secondhand. To outsiders, it sounded unreal, too clean, too precise, too perfectly timed. But to those who understood combat, it rang true. War occasionally produces moments where skill, timing, and resolve align so perfectly that they feel scripted. This was one of those moments. Years later, when younger operators heard the story, it wasn't framed as inspiration in the traditional sense. It was framed as a standard, a reminder that somewhere out there, someone might be watching, measuring, waiting for the exact second when intervention matters most. And if that moment comes, the expectation is simple. Act without hesitation, change the outcome, and disappear without applause. That is how legends are born. Not in spotlight, but in silence.